The message came on a quiet Thursday evening, just as I was winding down from work. My phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Dinner at home this Sunday. Your father and I have something important to share. Don't be late." The words were simple, but something about them made my chest tighten. My parents rarely used the word important, and never together in a message. At first, I tried to ignore the uneasiness. Maybe it was good news, something about the family trip I'd been helping to organize for months. Maybe they wanted to surprise me with gratitude, or tell me they'd finally booked the last set of tickets. Still, a part of me couldn't shake the chill that came with that text. My gut whispered that something was off. Sunday arrived faster than I wanted it to. I remember dressing carefully, not too formal, not too casual, wanting to appear relaxed but respectful. On the way there, I bought a small cake, a habit I'd picked up every time I visited. My family loved my thoughtfulness. At least, that's what I believed. When I reached the house, everything seemed perfect. The air smelled of jollof rice, pepper soup, and roasted chicken, my mother's specialties. My dad greeted me with his usual half-smile, the one that said, "I'm happy you came, but don't make too much noise." My mom hugged me tightly, her perfume sweet and familiar. On the surface, it felt like home. But the atmosphere was strange, too calm, too polite. My younger sister kept glancing at her phone, my dad avoided eye contact, and my mom was overcompensating, asking about my job, my health, my friends, even my favorite color these days. It was as if everyone was performing a play, and I didn't know my lines. We sat down to eat. The table was beautifully set, candles, fresh flowers, even my dad's old jazz playlist playing softly in the background. For a moment, I almost let myself believe this was just a normal family dinner, but deep down, I felt the storm coming. Then, mid-meal, my dad cleared his throat. That sound alone made the air shift. He looked at my mom, and she gave a small nod, one of those silent permissions only long-married couples understand. My heart began to race. "Your mother and I wanted to talk to you about the trip," he began. Instantly, my smile froze. The trip, the family trip I had planned, organized, and paid for all $9,200 of it. I leaned forward, curious but cautious. "Yes," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. He paused again, rubbing his temple as if searching for the right words. My mom placed her hand on his arm, then turned to me with that same gentle smile she used whenever she was about to deliver bad news. "We've been thinking, and we decided it might be best if you don't come on the trip." For a second, I didn't understand. My fork hung midair. I blinked, waiting for the joke, the laughter, the just kidding. That never came. "What?" I finally whispered. My dad avoided my eyes. My mom looked down at her plate. The air grew heavy, thick with silence and shame. In that moment, surrounded by food I could no longer taste, I realized this dinner wasn't about family. It was a trap dressed as love. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always arrive with anger. Sometimes it comes with calm voices and gentle tones that slice deeper than any shout could. My mom's voice trembled just slightly as she tried to explain. "We've talked about it for weeks. You've been working so hard lately, and honestly, we think you need a break from everything." I blinked at her, confused. "A break? The trip is the break. That's why I planned it. That's why I—" My words stumbled out, shaky and sharp. Dad cut in before I could finish. "It's not that simple, son. There's a lot going on. We didn't want to burden you further." Burden me? I nearly laughed. I was the one who'd paid for everything. Flights, hotel bookings, guided tours, even a group excursion I added as a surprise. I remembered every late night at my desk, calculating expenses, sacrificing small pleasures just to make sure my parents and siblings would have the best time possible. I swallowed hard. My appetite gone. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly, my voice dropping low. "You're all going on the trip, the one I paid for, without me." My sister finally looked up from her phone. Her eyes darted between me and my parents, guilt swimming behind them. My mom sighed. "It's not like that. You're misunderstanding." "How am I misunderstanding?" I snapped, my calm cracking at the edges. $9,200 came from my account. Every receipt has my name on it. The room fell silent again, the kind of silence that hurts your ears. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly. "Watch your tone," he said quietly. "You're talking to your parents." That was the line, the one that always came when I dared to speak up. Respect, that unspoken rule in African households that often means obedience, no matter how wrong something feels. I pushed my chair back, my heart pounding. "So respect means paying for a vacation I'm not invited to." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "You're making this harder than it has to be," she whispered. "We didn't want to upset you, but your father and I thought, maybe you should stay behind. You've been under pressure. You can rest, maybe take a short retreat for yourself." I almost laughed again, a bitter, hollow sound. Rest. They wanted me to rest while my own family enjoyed a vacation I financed. For a moment, I just stared at them, these two people I'd grown up believing would never hurt me. I saw their lips moving, offering excuses, soft words that did nothing but deepen the wound. In that instant, I realized this wasn't about concern or misunderstanding, it was about control, about the silent belief that I owed them everything, even my silence. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. "You could have just said you didn't want me there," I said quietly. "You didn't have to pretend it was love." No one answered. My dad simply reached for another spoonful of rice. My mom looked away, wiping her eyes with the edge of her napkin. The only sound left was the soft clinking of cutlery against plates. That's when it hit me. This dinner wasn't a conversation, it was a verdict. And my only crime was giving too much to people who thought my love came with no limits. I drove home that night with my chest burning, the road lights blurring through angry tears. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they hurt. Every mile replayed their words in my head. "It's for your own good. You need to rest." Lies wrapped in politeness. The kind that only hurt more because they sounded like care. When I got home, I threw my jacket on the couch and sank to the floor. The silence was deafening. I opened my banking app. The trip payments glared back at me like evidence of my foolishness. $9,200. A total that once felt like love now looked like betrayal written in digits. Flights to Cape Town for 5 four-star hotel reservations, safari bookings, transportation. I could see every confirmation email I'd sent with excitement just a month earlier. I had thought of everything: my mother's favorite view, my father's preference for early flights, my siblings' comfort. I wanted this trip to be perfect. It was supposed to be a symbol of gratitude, a gesture to show them that I had finally made it, that all their sacrifices for me had paid off. But in return, they had chosen to cut me out completely, without even hesitation. I wanted to call my mom and yell, "How could you do this to me?" But I didn't, because I already knew the answer. In our family, and in many African homes, love and control often wore the same face. You're expected to give without question, to serve without recognition, to obey without resistance. And the moment you question it, you're called disrespectful or ungrateful. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. They didn't see the $9,200 as a gift. They saw it as a duty fulfilled. To them, it wasn't my money. It was family money. That word family had always been sacred to me, but now, it felt like a chain. The next morning, I woke up to a message from my sister. "I'm sorry. I didn't agree with them, but I couldn't say anything." That single text broke me all over again. So everyone knew. They had discussed it, planned it, and none of them said a word to me until that dinner. I stared at the message for a long time, my throat tightening. I wanted to be angry at her, but I couldn't. She was just another piece in the same system, one that teaches silence in the name of peace. That day, I didn't eat. I didn't speak to anyone. I just sat by my window, staring at the sunlight fading against the wall. Every passing minute felt like a new realization. I wasn't just excluded from the trip, I was excluded from my own family's respect, and for the first time in my life, I questioned whether blood truly meant loyalty, or if sometimes, it was just the easiest excuse to keep taking from those who never stop giving. I whispered to myself, half in pain, half in clarity, they didn't just take my money, they took my trust. That's when something inside me shifted, a quiet, cold determination. If they could plan my exclusion behind my back, then I could plan my independence in silence. Days turned into weeks. But the ache didn't fade, it only changed shape. I stopped calling them, and they didn't reach out either. It was as if my silence had become the easy way out for everyone. Maybe they thought time would heal things, or maybe they didn't care enough to fix what they broke. Either way, the house that once felt like a home now existed in my mind as a place of betrayal. Then one morning, I opened Instagram and froze. There it was, a photo of my family smiling on the balcony of a luxury resort. The caption read, "Family time, finally." My mom's bright smile, my dad's arm proudly around her shoulder, my siblings laughing in the sun. The same trip, the same dates, the one I paid for. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone had poured ice water over my chest. Every image I scrolled through hit me like a punch. Them on the safari, at the beach, eating dinner, posing in matching outfits I'd helped order. I felt like an outsider looking into a world I had built but wasn't allowed to enter. Friends began messaging me. Wait, aren't you supposed to be there? Did you cancel last minute? Bro, your family looks amazing out there. Each message cut deeper than the last. I couldn't bring myself to reply. What would I even say? They went without me, but I paid for it. It sounded ridiculous, pathetic, even. That night, I deleted my social media apps and sat in the dark, the glow from my phone screen fading to black. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every extra shift, every skipped outing, every night I stayed awake calculating expenses. I had poured my energy, time, and love into something that was supposed to bring us closer, but it only exposed how far apart we really were. The next day, my sister called. Her voice was hesitant. They said not to tell you. But, Mom cried the first night. She felt guilty. I stayed silent, staring at the ceiling. Guilt. That word meant nothing without action. You can't cry on a beach I paid for and call it remorse. She hesitated again. They said they'll make it up to you when they return. I laughed quietly, not bitterly this time, just hollow. Tell them not to bother. That was the moment I decided to let go. I didn't block them. I didn't send angry messages. I didn't even ask for the money back. I just detached. The kind of quiet detachment that doesn't need an announcement, it simply exists. While they were still abroad, I started planning my own trip. Not an expensive one, just a solo weekend getaway to the mountains. It wasn't about luxury. It was about peace. I wanted to sit somewhere far away and remember who I was before guilt disguised as love began dictating my choices. As I packed my small bag, a strange calm filled me. I realized something powerful. They might have taken my money, but they couldn't take my clarity. And sometimes, that's the first step toward freedom, realizing that peace isn't something your family gives you, it's something you decide to keep, no matter who tries to take it away. When they finally returned, I didn't rush to visit. I didn't even ask how the trip went. The photos had already told me everything I needed to know. Laughter without guilt, comfort without consequence. But the silence between us wasn't just distance. It was transformation. I wasn't the same person anymore. A week later, my mom called. We haven't seen you since we got back, she said softly. Her tone carried that same mix of concern and control. Why don't you come for dinner this Sunday? I almost smiled. The last family dinner had burned itself into my memory like a scar. I thought for a long moment before answering. I'll think about it. On Sunday, I went, not out of duty, but closure. The house looked the same, smelled the same, but everything felt different. My mother opened the door and smiled, that familiar warmth mixed with unease. My father was in his armchair, reading the newspaper like nothing had happened. The conversation started politely. As always, they told stories about the trip, the markets, the views, the funny things that happened. Each word brushed against the wound they created, but I didn't flinch. I just listened, calm and detached, as though I were hearing about strangers. When my dad finally asked, "So, how have you been?" I took a deep breath and met his gaze. "Better," I said simply, quieter, and clearer about where I stand. They both went still. My mom's smile faded a little. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've realized something," I continued. "That love doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It doesn't mean funding people who see your kindness as an obligation. It means respect, mutual respect. And I don't feel that here anymore." My mother's eyes glistened, and for the first time, I saw real emotion that wasn't wrapped in excuses. My father stayed silent, his expression unreadable. I leaned back, my tone steady. "I'm not angry anymore. I just understand now that sometimes, family teaches you your biggest lessons even if it hurts." The room was quiet for a long time. No one spoke. The only sound was the ticking clock on the wall. My father finally folded his paper and looked at me. Maybe for the first time seeing me not as a child, but as a man. "We didn't mean to hurt you," he said finally. "We thought we were doing what's best." I nodded. "I know, but sometimes, doing what you think is best for others means forgetting what's right." Dinner ended quietly. No raised voices, no apologies, just an unspoken acknowledgement that something had changed forever. As I stood up to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. It felt different this time, heavier, almost like regret. When I stepped outside, the evening air felt clean and light against my skin. I walked to my car with a calm heart. As I drove away, I realized I wasn't leaving my family behind. I was leaving the version of myself that believed love had to hurt to be real. That night, I wrote in my journal, I gave them $9,200 and lost my place at their table, but what I gained was priceless self-respect. A few days later, I sat in a small cafe downtown, watching families laugh around me. Their voices rose and fell, like music, light, effortless, untouched by the kind of heaviness I carried. I wondered how many of them were pretending to, smiling while something inside them quietly broke. I opened my phone again, scrolled through old messages from my parents, the planning group chat for the trip, the excited emojis, the "we're so proud of you." I couldn't delete them yet. Every message felt like a ghost, haunting me with what I thought was love. But slowly, the pain started to shift into something else, reflection. I began to understand that what hurt most wasn't losing money. It was realizing how blind I had been. My parents hadn't changed overnight. The signs had always been there. I had just refused to see them. Every time I paid a bill without being asked. Every time I gave up something for their comfort. I thought I was proving love. But all I had been doing was teaching them to expect it. I remembered how, growing up, my father would say, "Family comes first, even before yourself." I believed that. But now, sitting alone in that cafe, I wondered, what happens when family never puts you first? A waitress came by, setting a cup of hot tea in front of me. "Ruibos," she said with a smile, "on the house." That small act of kindness made me realize something powerful. Sometimes strangers show you the gentleness you've begged for from family. I went home and started writing. Not a message to them, but a letter to myself. I wrote about boundaries, about respect, about the kind of love I wanted to give and receive. I promised myself that the next time I gave, it would be from abundance, not guilt. The next morning, I transferred the rest of my savings into a separate account. I renamed it Peace Fund. Not family, not home, just peace. That was my new goal. Weeks later, my sister dropped by unannounced. She looked nervous. "They miss you," she said quietly. I smiled faintly. "I miss them too," I admitted. "But missing someone doesn't mean you should return to what broke you." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "You've changed," she whispered. "I had to," I said. "They taught me what love shouldn't feel like." As she left, I stood by the door for a while, watching her walk down the street. I didn't feel bitterness anymore, only clarity. Love, I realized, doesn't always come from blood. Sometimes it's found in peace, solitude, and self-respect. That night, I went to bed early. The first time in months I slept without replaying that dinner in my head. I didn't dream of confrontation or apologies. I dreamed of stillness, sitting by the sea, my heart light and unburdened. They might never understand what they took from me, but I finally understood what I had gained: freedom. Months had passed since the dinner, but the lesson it carved into my heart felt permanent. I wasn't angry anymore, just aware. Aware of how easily love can turn into expectation. How doing your best can become a trap when people start believing your effort is endless. I started noticing small things in my life that had changed because of that night. I said no more often, not with bitterness, but with peace. When coworkers asked for extra favors, I didn't stretch myself thin to please them. When friends hinted that I should cover bills because I had a good job, I smiled and declined. It wasn't stinginess, it was self-preservation. I also began therapy, something I'd avoided for years. I told my therapist about the trip, the dinner, and how it wasn't just about money but identity. She nodded and said something that stuck with me. "You didn't lose your family that night. You lost the illusion that they valued you the way you valued them." That sentence sat with me for days. It wasn't cruel. It was liberating. I had been chasing validation from people who only saw my giving, not my personhood. In our sessions, I unpacked what it meant to grow up in a culture that glorified sacrifice. I realized that in many African homes, children are raised to serve, not to question. Love is duty, not dialogue. And when you try to set boundaries, you're labeled as selfish or westernized. But I wasn't rebelling against my culture, I was reclaiming my peace. My therapist reminded me that healthy love has room for individuality, that it's okay to love your family and still say, enough. Around that time, I started writing again, not about pain, but about healing. I shared my thoughts online under the tag #AfricanTales, stories of lessons hidden in love, of strength disguised as silence. To my surprise, people related deeply. Messages poured in, strangers saying they'd experienced the same kind of quiet betrayal from people they loved. One comment read, "You didn't lose them, you found yourself." And that's a gain most people never reach. Those words felt like a mirror reflecting what I had been feeling all along. Maybe this was the reason it all happened, so I could stop living as the family provider and start living as myself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, I lit a candle and whispered a small prayer, not for revenge or reconciliation, but gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that taught me boundaries. And for the betrayal that opened my eyes to self-worth. I still loved my parents. That hadn't changed. But love now had conditions, not the kind that limits, but the kind that protect. And that's when I understood something profound. Forgiveness isn't about letting people back in, it's about freeing yourself from waiting for their apology. So I forgave them quietly, without telling them, because I didn't need their response anymore. Peace had already replied for me. Almost a year had passed since that dinner. But the memory still lingered like a shadow I'd learned to live beside. I no longer flinched when I saw family group chats or old photos. They didn't sting anymore. They simply reminded me of how far I'd come. It was a Saturday evening when my phone rang. It was Mom again. Her voice was warm, hesitant. "We're having dinner tomorrow," she said softly. "Just us. No announcements, I promise." For a second, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no to protect the peace I had built, but another part of me wanted closure, not confrontation. "All right," I replied. "I'll come." The next night, I arrived early. The house looked exactly as I remembered. The scent of fried plantains, the soft music, the clinking of plates. But this time, I didn't feel nervous or small. I felt centered, grounded. Mom smiled when she saw me. "You look good," she said. And for the first time in a long while, it sounded genuine. My father nodded quietly, his eyes avoiding mine at first, then meeting them with something I hadn't seen before: humility. We ate in relative peace. No tension, no hidden agenda. Halfway through, my dad cleared his throat, the same way he had before the first dinner. I braced myself unconsciously, but his words surprised me. "We owe you an apology," he said simply. The room fell still. My mother's eyes welled up, and she nodded in agreement. "We were wrong," she whispered. "We thought we were doing what's best, but we hurt you instead." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I had spent so long imagining this moment, the apology, the acknowledgement, but now that it was here, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Still, it mattered that they said it. "I forgive you," I said quietly, "but I've changed. I won't give like that again. Not because I don't love you, but because I finally love myself too." My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling as she held mine. "That's all we want," she said softly, "for you to be happy." We finished dinner slowly, talking about lighter things, the weather, work, life. It wasn't the same as before, but maybe it wasn't supposed to be. Maybe real healing isn't about going back, it's about moving forward with understanding. When I left that night, my father walked me to the door. As I turned to go, he said something I'll never forget. "You taught us something, you know? That love isn't about giving everything. It's about knowing when to stop." I smiled. "It took me $9,200 to learn that lesson," I said, "but I'm glad I did." Driving home, the city lights blurred against the windshield. For the first time, I didn't feel angry or sad, just grateful. Grateful that I had lived through betrayal and found strength on the other side. When I reached home, I lit a candle by my window and whispered, "I paid $9,200 to buy my peace, and it was the best deal of my life." And that was the truth. A year later, I found myself sitting by the ocean in Zanzibar, not with my family this time, but alone, at peace. The waves rolled in gently, each one erasing a little more of the pain I once carried. I had come here as a gift to myself. A quiet promise that I wouldn't let life's betrayals define me. The sea breeze carried memories, the sound of my mother's laughter, my father's firm voice, the clinking of cutlery, on that night of the dinner. But now, they didn't hurt. They were just echoes from another chapter. One that had already ended. I pulled out my journal, the same one where I had written my vow months ago, and began to write again. The words came easily this time, flowing like the tide. "I've learned that family doesn't always mean safety. Sometimes, it means lessons. Sometimes, love hurts before it heals. But when you rise from it, you don't come back bitter, you come back wiser." That trip, my own solo trip, became everything I wanted the family vacation to be. I watched sunsets that felt like forgiveness and walked beaches that felt like starting over. I realized that peace isn't something anyone gives you. It's something you create when you stop waiting for others to value you. Back home, life went on. My parents called more often now, not out of obligation, but genuine care. Conversations were lighter, more respectful. My father even laughed when I teased him about his expensive lesson. My mother, still soft-hearted, would send me recipes over text, signing them with hearts and emojis she never used before. I didn't forget what happened. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means no longer letting the memory control you. The distance between us was still there, but it was no longer painful. It was healthy, space to breathe, to grow, to love each other from a distance without resentment. Sometimes, my sister would visit and say, "You've changed so much, you're calm now." And I'd smile and reply, "Peace looks good on me." One day, she told me that our parents had decided to take another trip, smaller, humbler, just the two of them. They wanted to handle everything themselves this time. I laughed, truly laughed, and said, "Good, they're finally learning too." As I closed my journal one evening, I realized how far I'd come. From that shocked, heartbroken child sitting at a dinner table to this, a person who had found serenity in solitude. Life has a way of breaking you to rebuild you differently, and sometimes, that difference becomes your strength. I looked out at the horizon and whispered, almost like a prayer, "May I never forget the price of peace, and may I never pay for love with my own silence again." The waves answered with their rhythm, soft and endless. Somewhere in the distance, a bird soared across the fading sun. I smiled and closed my eyes. The story that had once begun in pain now ended in peace, not the kind that's given, but the kind that's earned.